First things first, before we can address what the issues are with socialism coming from my perspective, we must first understand what socialism is, or have some kind of narrow definition of what it is and what this ideology encompasses. I'm fully aware that socialism comes in various shapes and colors, and a lot of people seem to have somewhat of a different idea of what this ideology is about. The definition that I will be using for this video, which I find to be encompassing of all types uh, of policies of which my criticism lies, goes as follows. A political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. In this series, I will focus both on the idea of a regulated means of production as well as common ownership of it. I'll bring up some facts and personal experience with public businesses and what I believe are their primary problems and how I think that they can better be solved. Okay, so what exactly does it mean to own the means of production? There are many interpretations to this, but as far as I have understood, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the means of production can be anything that a worker needs to perform their work. It can be the factory, it can be the tools that the worker is using to mine up and dig minerals, and even land is a possible candidate or component to be called means of production. The idea is then that if only the workers themselves owned all these means of production, the world would basically become a better place for the various reasons that proponents of socialism will give you, such as better working conditions, better income inequality, etc. Now, here are my criticisms with this ideology. Number one, there is a lack of incentive to innovate and create more means of production. If you think about it like this, if nobody but the workers are allowed to own and profit off of the means of production, it basically means in turn that any form of setting up a means of production for profit is evil and exploitative. After all, if you are making money off of people working, you are basically exploiting them according to this logic. If you are not getting profits, why would anyone in the right mind be incentivized to make more factories, to make more tools for people to use, to prospect for people to find up, to dig up, to make the machineries for people to operate? One simply would not. Profit, profit and coercion, self-interest, and violence are the only two forces that makes things happen in society. It's either the carrot or the stick. You may argue that only a certain kind of ownership of the means of production is exploitative, that buying a hammer and renting it out to a person that needs it is exploitative, but not to sell it. That is a fair point, but I would like to argue that a free and unregulated market is very good at getting people what they want, to the degree that it is achievable, and is generally good at responding to changes in supply and demand. Think about it like this. If renting houses because they are scarce makes it so that more people are incentivized to build more houses, by the mere virtue that some of the houses can be rented out, you will end up with more houses, which will push down the price of houses. And likewise, the market is good at responding to supply and demand shifts. If people want to make coffee every morning, you damn well bet that there is going to be coffee in the nearest retail store. If people want more hammers, you better expect that the prices will go up. And if there is a way that you can make a hammer cheaper, someone will do it and they will make a buck out of it. In a world where the workers or the public owns the means of production, there is less reason to innovate the quality of the means of production and increase the quantity, because no one is allowed to make profit off of it. So, what would motivate people otherwise? Well, you could make the case that people are self-motivated, that people want to do things for themselves. But it only goes so far, really. Because just as a taxi driver is not a mechanical engineer and does not know how their car engine works, and has very little chance, generally speaking, to upgrade their engine or to innovate the car engine. Workers that own the means of production are specialized in doing their job, doing their work, so to speak. And it's very often the case, almost always, that the people that are doing the work are not the experts on the means of production. So you know, it would have been a fair point to make 300 years ago that workers could self-innovate when the technology was not quite as good as it is today. But, you know, today it is impossible to know everything, and there is a good need to specialize in certain areas of doing good for society. Nobody's going to buy land with ores on it, dig up all the ores, refine the metals, and do all the manufacturing and processing, and turn the metals into something useful. And it's not just because it requires a lot of capital to get started with this, but actually because, you know, it takes a lot of skill and you can't do it yourself. It takes a lot of knowledge. And you know, most people that owns a car, they don't really know how a car engine works. How car engine work. And you know, there will always come a point where a worker will need to extend the chain of production to buy goods and services from someone else. And they have to be motivated to do so. And the thing that can motivate them is either some form of self-interest or coercion. Self-interest or coercion. There are no other options, right? Even if that self-interest is a person feeling good about themselves doing something, self-interest it is. There is self-interest and coercion, And the most practical kind of self-interest driven economy is one with monetary profits as the main driving force that motivates people to do stuff. So the potential for profit is what makes people want to start new businesses, and exactly to the degree that capacity to starting new businesses exists versus selling your own labor to someone that needs it is the amount that new businesses are going to be made in a free and unregulated market. As I said before, market is good at responding to changes, to shifts in supply and demand. Retail stores in Sweden here were open, has been for long, even though a lot of people aren't going to work. The retail stores are still open. They just they put a screen in front of the cash register. So the market finds a way. The market is good at responding to changes in supply and demand. So that was the long number one. Here's number two. It leads to forced labor. As mentioned earlier, and I cannot stress this hard enough, socialism has the problem that people needs to be coordinated. And you can only coordinate with self-interest or coercion. All right? Self-interest or coercion. Those are the options. So people need to be coordinated, and as the supply chain grows, and to make production of goods and services available to the degree that people want and are interested in. This happens very often because there are jobs that nobody wants to do. Nobody likes to take care of people's trash, for example. If people are not going to be rewarded for doing certain types of work, it very often means that instead of following the natural market rhythm of letting prices go up and allowing innovation to happen, or providing alternative options for the same satisfaction that the product is giving, it means that some people will be obligated to work for free in order to accomplish the things that government decides needs to be done. Think about it like this. If everybody owns the road that we all use to drive to work, why should I put the time and investment into repairing and maintaining the road? Clearly, I am much better off if someone else does it for me. And everybody naturally thinks the same way, because after all, it is to our evolutionary advantage to do so. This means that inevitably some kind of central dictating entity or agency needs to coercively make people repair the roads in one way or another. Whether it be through taxes, or if it is through just straight up pointing a gun at people and making them repair the road, all that the government can really do to make people repair the roads is coercive. In nature, government is coercive in nature. this like the reason why every implementation of socialism that has ever existed throughout history has had some form of superstate that has ended up scaring people to work or killing, slaughtering a bunch of people, or had some kind of dictatorship. And it's basically because socialism is all about those quote-unquote rich evil capitalists giving up their money. And what if they don't want to give up their money? Well, then basically a socialist needs to pull up a gun. Hey, rich evil capitalist, give me all your money. Alright? If there was a way that capitalists would voluntarily give up their money, I would become a communist. But there is not. You always end up having to force people to give up their properties. You have to force people to give up what they own. And that is simply not a good thing to do. And so finally, this will be the end of this first initial video, I think. Charity exists. So a lot of people say, when you achieve anarcho-capitalism, how are you going to help the poor? How are the poor going to make it in your anarcho-capitalist society? And the answer to that is charity exists. And if you're one of those people that think that charity isn't enough to help the poor, just remember that Bill Gates, and I actually ran the numbers for this, link will be in the description as soon as I have time to put it there. Bill Gates has donated more money to charity than the Swedish government is annually budgeting out to healthcare companies across the country. This is a massive contribution, and the money is also used more efficiently because you don't have a ton of government bureaucracies like have you ever tried to get a welfare check from Försäkringskassan? It is absolutely terrible. They will try their very hardest to make it difficult for you to get that welfare check, and they will try their very hardest to, even if you do need the welfare check, they will try and make it so that you don't get it. And so like I think that charity is going to be a more efficient way to help poor people than if they were to be given welfare checks or food stamps or some other kind of government coercive solution. It's just what I think. And yeah, that was the first video. I will be making part 2 soon.